Sunday from 2 to 5 for Women's Voices on Air. We know our challenges. We are the experts of our lives.
We are master multitaskers, prioritizing our family, friends, and our faith above our own needs.
Our needs and voices are too often overlooked.
Please join us this Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. for Women's Voices on Air.
We tell our stories in our own way.
Oh, we want to pump you up today. This is God Is, and we're doing a lot of different things in your community. We want to make sure we get in touch with each and every person that is. And so go to our Instagram, Facebook, tweet. We doing it all in your community. Go to our website also. Look us up, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Inspirational gospel music and also God Is Talk Show. Miss Dinah doing it all as we're doing it right here on your favorite community radio station. So look us up. Go to our website. This is God Is, an inspiration of gospel music.
And welcome to our live studio audience for another exciting edition of Did You Know? And here we go with round one. Did You Know?
The COVID vaccine is free and easy to get. You don't need insurance or an appointment to get your vaccine. Vaccines are available at many locations near you.
And now we're going to double the value. Did you know?
The COVID-19 vaccine is always free of cost. You can visit pharmacies, community health centers, and other health providers in your neighborhood.
And now for the lightning round. Did you know?
The Delta variant of COVID is a mutation that has health experts worried because it's twice as contagious.
Then for our finale. Did you know?
The best way to protect yourself from the COVID Delta variant is to get fully vaccinated. Get your vaccine today.
Find out more at kingcounty.gov/vaccine. Did you know?
You are listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Don't forget to log on www.rainieravenue radio.world.
Good time.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Juan Cotto and Mick Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, on our community radio station, your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. And today, this is WIAA Weekly, our discussion with the Executive Director on issues in youth sports. Mick, welcome, and great to see you again.
Yep,
thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
How you doing?
Good, on the move.
Mick is on the move, and he'll share some of the things that he's been working on, and we'll have a conversation today about two issues that I think are really important, supporting young girls and females in athletics throughout our state and throughout our districts. And also, we're going to talk about supporting coaches and the important role that they have to mentor our kids and make sure that we are keeping our coaches up to date, not only in terms of developing skills, but developing young people in the community. Couple of issues before we get started. I want to share with you that Rainier Avenue Radio is going to be broadcasting what we do best. We broadcast and tell the stories of our kids playing football this weekend. We have on Friday evening, the Rainier Beach Vikings and Coach Corey Sampson are going to take on the Roosevelt Rough Riders at Memorial Stadium at 5 o'clock. Then the nightcap, the number 2 team in the state of Washington, the Garfield Bulldogs. You saw them a couple of weeks ago when we were down at Lumen Field taking on Seattle Prep. And boy, they have a team that is incredibly fast and incredibly well coached, incredibly disciplined. They put a lot of points on the scoreboard, those Bulldogs. They are taking on Ballard, and that's going to start at 7:45 p.m. So extremely excited about those. Mick, switching topics now. Let's going into the show. Sunday, I was at the Seattle Seahawks football game. And arguably the greatest professional athlete in our city's history here in Seattle, Sue Bird raised the 12th man flag or the 12th person flag, or the 12th fan flag. And it was very, very powerful, a tremendous ovation she had an opportunity to speak with Coach Carroll before the game. And when you think about the impact that Sue Bird has had on our community, her incredible career, a career where, you know, she came as a curiosity, one of the great players in college basketball, and 2 decades later, she is retiring as an icon in this community. I start to think about the importance of sports, especially for young girls. And I'm just wondering, the WIAA, how do we maintain an opportunity to create more Sue Birds?
Yeah, well, it's, again, given the opportunity to play, and then making sure we have coaches and mentors that are focused not just on wins and losses, but developing the person, that they keep the perspective of education-based activities, athletics, first and foremost, and allow young women to experience that and continue to give them the skills to transfer that to others. I mean, there's no better role model than, you know, when we talk about inclusivity and that, the reason it's so important is when you see people that you know you can be, it gives you the opportunity to dream a little bigger than maybe what you would otherwise dream.
The challenges, and obviously there seems to be at certain areas the challenge of the equity between boys sports and girls sports. And for us who have daughters, which I do and you do, you know, how do we create an equitable sports are getting the proper attention they deserve, getting the desirable coaches that they deserve, and also the outcomes that they deserve, like you mentioned, developing people in those sports.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be intentional with it, and it doesn't mean you treat everybody the same. And we've talked about this. You know, everybody starts at a different starting line. The idea is to get everybody to the same finish line. So if you need to help whoever with that start, right, for whatever reason, whatever barriers cause that, then you need to put your energy into that. The other piece, what we do as a WIA is, you know, when we pick venues and ways of hosting events, we're very intentional. That's why basketball, you know, we're limited on our options of where we play, because we're not going to put one in one venue and one in an inferior venue. Swimming is in the same type of venue. When we look at baseball, softball, it's similar. Track we do together. So when we're picking golf courses, we do it together. So tennis, we do it by classification and not by gender. And so as the WI team, we're very conscientious of that. I mean, almost half our staff are females. And so, you know, we're intentional when we hire. And so, and we can always get better, but you have to continue to work at it. And then the other piece is that you find ways to highlight. So if you look at our athletes of the week and our LEAP, our student leadership program, we're very intentional where we have some control of welcoming and inviting and bringing and including females in this case as part of that. And so, you know, we tend to naturally migrate to like-minded people, and that may come from your gender or where you live or your experience. Our job is to mix that up and to help educate and grow people. And so I think that's the greatest way we can do that. And then when we have great examples, the Haley Van Lifts and the Sue Birds, people who have excelled, we highlight them, and we're intentional with that. And so as much as they're willing to allow us to do that.
We have experienced the 50th anniversary of Title IX.
Yep.
It was very well publicized and made, the awareness was raised about Title IX and a variety of different avenues on ESPN and the other news entities. And I'm wondering, does Title IX impact the WIAA? And if so, how it does it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, we're in the midst of finalizing our participation numbers from last year, and we share those and publish those with our schools. And so they basically keep a scorecard on how they're doing. We have a program right now that we're in the midst of evaluating through our DEI team on how to target any underrepresented demographic. So it can be gender, it could be by language, it could be special needs, and have schools and recognize and incentivize schools to put an intentional plan together to increase participation. So our job is to find a way to incentivize it. And so with Title IX, absolutely, we want our schools in compliance. And, you know, and ironically, what we typically see and what we have to figure out is at the middle school level, a lot of times will be almost in some cases a reverse Title IX situation with more female athletes than male athletes. But when we get to high school, that flips. and why is that? And so we don't have an answer for that yet. We need to find out best practices, schools that are doing it well, and then have them share that with their counterparts around the state and make sure that we're not doing anything that is preventing that. So example of what we're working with the NFL Foundation right now of rolling out and piloting girls flag football. And so the NFL Foundation has made funding available. Tacoma and Franklin Pierce school districts started it 2 years ago, and Seattle last year. And we have a few more schools that are talking about doing it to provide that seed money, and then they just need to sustain it. So we're trying to find ways to bring opportunities. Our board just on Sunday, we meet on Sundays. They split the girls wrestling classification, right? Which means that it's growing, and now more girls will have the opportunity to wrestle at the state tournament. And so, I'm a father of a daughter, a WIAA athlete. And so, watching her experience was important. And then OSPI, WASA, from the state athletic administrators have some best practices. And so we encourage that. We're going to work with OSPI they're going to do some Title IX trainings. They're bringing those back. And so we're going to promote them, offer our facilities, help get people there to make sure, ignorance of the law or the rule isn't an acceptable excuse. Our job is education. So we're going to try to find anywhere we can to educate people, because then, the good people doing the work in the schools are going to do the right thing for our students.
He is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington State Interscholastic Activities Association. I am Juan Cotto, and I, of course, am a radio on-air personality, I guess, in this persona, at Rainier Avenue Radio.world, our community radio station, your community radio station. And out there in our audience, if you like politics, which I hope you do, we have a number of important local elections. If you heard the broadcast that we did at Lumen Field, we discussed the importance of voting. Today on this conversation, we are discussing the fact that if you want to learn more about the candidates, Rainier Avenue Radio will have local election forums coming up all throughout the fall here in October, leading up into the elections. So please, if you want to learn more about the candidates, and if you want to have an understanding of the important issues that are going to shape this election, and all politics is local, if you read the book by Tip O'Neill, then you need to listen to Rainier Avenue Radio.world for that information. Mick, give us a rundown of the athletics and the sports that our young females can participate in.
So we have, some of our traditional ones: soccer, cross country, volleyball in the falls. There's swimming, and then basketball, wrestling, football is available. And actually, one of the national trends is female participation is rising fast. In
contact football.
In contact football. So I have the statistics here from NFHS they sent out last week. I don't have them memorized, but I want to say it was 20-some% increase in tackle football and 40% increase in flag football. So you're talking thousands across the country. We're hoping to replicate that in Washington. We have the girls wrestling in the winter. We have slow pitch and fast pitch, and so which typically is a different athlete. And we have bowling as well for females. We get a lot of pushback from the boys. They want to play volleyball. They want to play bowling. Those are girls only sports. We have gymnastics, track which is the most popular one across the country, and then golf and tennis.
Has there been an interest in esports? Because I know on the boys' side, there's an esports interest.
Yeah, we're just rolling that out officially. It's predominantly boys right now. We're working with our CTE providers around the state to make sure there's a lot of intentional STEM programming around girls in STEM. And so we're hoping that will drive that interest as well. So, but esports is out there. And, one of the things we get a push a lot to add sports like boys volleyball, boys bowling, and lacrosse. And what our schools are very conscientious of, and we as supporters of our schools, is how that could create a larger Title IX. So then we invest our time to build up those female numbers in our existing sports, or adding new opportunities like wrestling, flag football, to see if we can increase those female numbers, and then we can continue to build out the total programming.
As we talk about coaches for female sports, And obviously the development of the athlete and the development of the person is the same, but there may be some concern from parents about their daughters, especially participating in sport, maybe for the very first time, or the people that will be working with sports. And it seems sometimes in athletics, we only hear about some of the bad situations.
Yeah.
And that may have a parent a little nervous about having their child participate in a particular sport. And I'm just wondering, what does the WIAA do to safeguard, obviously, the participation of young girls, but all of our children in athletics?
Yeah. So coaches are hired by the school district, so they're responsible for the background check. So everybody has to be background checked. We have required education for everybody, for every single coach, volunteer or paid. For everything from sudden cardiac to concussion protocols to DEI related to social emotional. We are launching, we're in the midst, we got a grant, it's called the Million Coaches Grant. We're partnering with the University of Washington to develop a social emotional learning training program. We have 50 coaches going through the pilot right now, helping the University of Washington team developed the curriculum in partnership with WIAA that we will be able to bring to the entire state upon conclusion in 3 years. We also are partnering with a group called Inside Out Coaching, Joe Ehrman and Jody Redmond. It's a national program, evidence-based, it's about, why do I coach the way I coach? What's it feel like to be coached? So again, not the X's and O's. Anybody, there's a million places you can go get X's and O's. We are focused on how people coach and the impact of coaching, because the reality, nobody has a bigger impact in this entire process than that coach, positive or negative. They're interacting with those students every single day. They have the potential to be their most significant confidant, other than a family member, because of that relationship they develop in a lesson structure. They also have the potential to be the most devastating. And so, we take that very seriously to do everything we can to support our schools with their personnel. So a lot of times something will happen and people will expect us to come in and levy sanctions and do things. We would report it, but we are not the supervisors of them. We provide the structure for schools, and schools can be more restrictive than that. And, coaching is one of the great, you were a coach, right? I mean, you smile, right? I mean, it is a labor of love. And the people who are doing it the right way, but there's also that small percent that prey on children. And, we have to do everything we can to avoid those situations, because there's 99.9% of the rest of them doing the right thing. And if you think back if you were an athlete, right? Who those coaches were that helped you get to where you're at. That's impact, right? So a lot of us were lucky to have parents in our lives that also did that. There's a lot of children who, for whatever reason, don't have that support, and the schoolhouse becomes the family in another way. And so the adults we put in front of them and turn our children over to, we have to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep it safe.
This is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I am Juan Cotto, and Rainier Avenue Radio .world personality and broadcaster and coach.
Yep.
I always consider myself a coach. Once a coach, always a coach. And we are here on our weekly conversation with the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, discussing issues in youth athletics and student athletics across the state of Washington. And we really appreciate Mick coming and spending his time. And hopefully this is something that you're learning from. And if you have questions, please dial in and let us know. And also you can send us information, and we will ask questions in future shows as we go along. Friday evening on Rainier Avenue Radio .world, once again, we'll be telling the story of our children in the community. We have the Roosevelt Rough Riders and the Rainier Beach Vikings. They are going to be playing down at Memorial Stadium, venerable Memorial Stadium. If you get a chance to go out and watch a high school football game, go down to Memorial Stadium on a Friday night. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. The fall, and as summer starts to turn into fall, it's such a great time to be there. And at 5 o'clock, just after work, if you'd like, the Vikings are taking on the Roosevelt Rough Riders, the Teddies. Should be a really, really entertaining ball game. If you like football teams that with tremendous amounts of speed and one of the great players in the state of Washington, Caleb Presley for Rainier Beach. He'll be there, the number 1 ranked player, and he is committed to the University of Oregon. So get a chance to take a look at him before we see him on Saturdays and then potentially on Sundays. Then at 7:45 at Memorial Stadium, we are going to have the Garfield Bulldogs celebrating their 100th, the centennial anniversary at Garfield High School, which my mother is an alumni, and they are taking on Ballard at 7:45 p.m. And in honor of the 100th year of Garfield, they have a really, really good football team ranked number 2 in the state of Washington. You saw them take on Seattle Prep and really just run right by Seattle Prep a couple of Friday nights ago. A very game Seattle Prep team beaten by that number 2 ranked Bulldog team. And we'll see if Ballard can provide any sort of resistance to the Garfield Bulldog attack. Mick, when I watch college sports on television and I see the women coaching the women, as I see the women coaches coaching those teams, you know, and I'm really excited about that. But every once in a while, you see a Gino Ariyama or some of these men's coaches in there, and I kind of scratch my head just a little bit because I think you know the women should be coaching the women. Men seem to be always coaching the men. I'm just wondering from the perspective that, and then not that I'm against it, you know, because I obviously think that people in the community need to step up and coach teams and take on opportunities when necessary. But what can the WIAA do to provide more opportunities to support women who want to pursue that pathway as a coach?
Yeah, I mean, we run a coaches school every year, so there's one place to start. The other piece is BJ Kuntz in our office has started a group called Women of Washington. And it started with athletic directors and it's continuing to expand. And it's basically networking for women who are interested in being involved in the athletic setting. And so it's initially an athletic director focus. And what we're hoping is that will continue to grow for current coaches or potential coaches. The other piece is providing opportunities for ongoing training. You know, it's interesting. The first time I went into one of the Women of Washington meetings, it was a Zoom. And I remember sitting at my desk and I'm thinking, do I belong in this meeting? Should I go in this meeting? Is this a place? Is this a space I should be included? And, you know, it's one of my teammates, BJ's running it, Cindy Adsit from our team's on there. And I'm thinking, well, I think so. So I went on and I actually they thanked me for being there at the end. I just listened in, trying to learn, like, where can we help? And, you know, I made that comment at the end. I said, I really appreciate you thanking me for being here because I wasn't sure if this was a space I should be in. And they're like, of course not. And then they started to share their experiences working in a predominantly male field, which is athletics in general, especially athletic administration. And for me, you know, again, that's when we talk about inclusivity. Why is it important to have a variety of perspectives? Because you get to learn about other perspectives. And for me, there's 2 women in particular on there that are incredible, that my perception and interactions with them is they're not afraid to speak up in a meeting. They're always spot on. They think through their answers. Like, they're people I have great respect and admiration for. And both of them shared their stories in a very emotional way about how every time they walk into a meeting, how they have to emotionally and psychologically prepare themselves to walk in the space because they feel like I did that day. And I have a title and, you know, an obligation in a lot of times. And I felt that way. I can only imagine people don't. And so we have to get better at that. And one of the, you know, a lot of our focus is always on our member schools, the students who are participating, the events that we run, and our ADs. And what we're working on now is expanding the coaches. And so I don't have a great answer for you right now. We're working towards it. We will get there at some point sooner than later. But we do have to find a way to make more access. Our focus right now, and I think we spoke about this in previous weeks, is really working on our AD BIPOC group of providing an opportunity and trying to find coaches or others that are involved that are interested in going into athletic administration. And so again, we're still working at that level. We need to get to that coaches level. So the other piece is, sorry, you give me a question, I can fill the whole time.
I love it. No. Keep going.
The other piece is our Washington State Coach Association will be a key partner with us. And so they are very active. They have what they call an ISA, a representative for every single sport. And so as you're saying this, I'm going to write myself a note because I'm going to ask them this question, what we can do to partner with them, not to put it on them. We'll still help lead it, but in partnership with our coach association, just like we do with our athletic director association. So
just remember Jerry Parrish, my good friend, who
Yeah.
One of the great people who in coaching started the Washington State Coaches Association and the impact that they have had for coaches. Mick, let me ask you this final question before we go to break. The proliferation of these travel teams and club teams, and it seems to be, I know in the boys' games, it's pulling kids away from certain sports at the high school level,
Yeah.
and there's an impact there, and 7-on-7 and so forth. Does that filter into the girls' game at all? And I know that there's incidences of girls who are participating in travel teams, and and certainly in some of the major sports. Just wondering, how does the WIAA sort of regulate this?
Yeah, well, we have rules around coaching. And also if somebody gets connected with a coach and then transfers to that coach's school if they're coaching in that. So that's primarily our role in it. I don't see this a club versus association. I think we have different needs that we each meet. Volleyball, in these national stats, volleyball is continuing to grow despite a huge club. My daughter played club volleyball, and we know most clubs are open to their girls playing high school sports still, right? But I think it impacts our girls basketball a little bit, especially for those really high-end club volleyball players. Where we're seeing the biggest hit from club sports is baseball and fast pitch, because those travel teams have, in a lot of cases, eliminated Little League on both sides, softball and that. And so those students who played in those younger years aren't playing now. So by the time they get to high school, they're so far behind. It's really become an elite. Soccer, we have not seen that, even though there's some soccer academies that don't allow their students to play club sports. So it hasn't become a significant issue. It's definitely something we're monitoring. And we actually want to continue to partner with those club sports because they serve a need, we serve a need, and we can coexist.
He's Mick Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Washington State Interscholastic Activities Association. I'm Juan Cotto, personality here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. We will be back to carry on the second part. We're going to talk a little about coaching when we return.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time, and when I'm not deep frying a turducken in a closed garage, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
PrEP is a daily pill that can significantly reduce your chances of getting HIV, and typically it takes a trip to a physician to get it. Now you can visit select pharmacies, get tested on the spot, and walk away with your first month of PrEP. It's easier than ever to protect yourself from HIV, and with all the coverage options, you can get it at a very low cost. To find your nearest participating pharmacy, go to doh.wa.gov/PrEP now. That's doh.wa.gov/PrEP. Do it now. This is a message from the Washington State Department of Health and Public Health, Seattle and King County.
What's on your heart? Are you exhausted at the lack of progress for people of color in business, politics, and life? This is Cindy Bright, the host of Heartbeat Radio. Each week, we explore this heart condition in the country that is affecting you and me. We have real conversations about what's necessary for change. It's time to change this dialogue. Will you join this Heartbeat weekly, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on Rainier Avenue Radio?
Wash your hands, don't touch your face, wipe things down, clean up your space. When you cough and sneeze, do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes?
Welcome back to
Check out our show schedule,
WIAA
updated
Primetime
weekly at
Weekly. I'm Juan Cotto,
RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Rainier Avenue Radio personality and sports broadcaster. And this is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. And this is our Tuesday afternoon conversation on issues impacting athletes and youth athletes and high school athletes all across Washington State. And Mick, thank you so much for taking time to come spend an hour with us on Tuesdays and give information about the importance of participating in athletics at the high school level. Friday night, speaking of athletics at the high school level, the Rainier Beach Vikings are going to be taking on the Roosevelt Rough Riders at beautiful, venerable old Memorial Stadium down in the Seattle Center, a stadium which many of you have heard is going to be redone here in the next couple of years. But it's still a very, very special place for all of us who grew up here in Seattle. A number of us played on that field, including our mayor, Bruce Harrell. He was a star at Garfield High School. Had two choices to go to school. He had an opportunity to go to Harvard, or he had the opportunity to go to the University of Washington. So pretty heady stuff for an athlete back in the day, and certainly gone on to a great career. But at 5 p.m., Rainier Beach is taking on Roosevelt. If you like defense, Coach Corey Sampson is a defensive whiz, and certainly will make it a tough time for those Roosevelt Rough Riders, although they've got some pretty decent athletes, and I'm sure they're going to go ahead and respond to the test that Coach Sampson puts out there for them. And then about 2 hours and 45 minutes later, Garfield and Ballard will be kicking off, and the number 2 ranked Garfield Bulldogs in the centennial year of Garfield High School. They'll be taking on the Ballard squad and the Ballard Beavers, and that's going to be a really, really exciting football game for you. And Garfield has a ton of speed and just a great football team. The speed is evident both on offense and on defense. If you saw the game a couple of weeks ago against Seattle Prep, that will be a great contest on Friday night, 7:45. Both games here on your community radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Mick, I want to talk about coaching. We can talk about, and we can take this in a variety of different ways. I had a conversation with that I was on a social platform this weekend. They were one of the schools in a football game had a very, very tough night. And they talked about the fact that one of the coaches, who was an assistant on my staff, was let go in the last winter. He was trying to build a program. And it seems like it's becoming more and more prevalent with coaching and coaches that sometimes when the scoreboard doesn't end up right, people who are really putting in a lot of time, effort, and energy, they're getting relieved of their duties maybe prematurely. And there are parents who complain on both sides. They understand what the coach is trying to build and want them to have the time to build it. At the same time, there are parents and there are administrators who almost view it like it's a professional sport. If the team's not performing well, we have to get somebody in who can make the team perform well. And we all know at high school athletics, sometimes that's just not the case. Right. And I'm just wondering from the perspective of the WIAA, what is being done to monitor some of those situations? We know they happen at the district level, and we know they happen at the school level, but what can we do to make sure that we are supporting coaches at this level and making sure that they are getting the respect they deserve and the opportunity they deserve to build the program, especially when they're in difficult situations?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think what we need to do is continue to help frame what the scoreboard is. And the scoreboard isn't the score at the end of the game. For people who have done it, you know you can do an amazing job coaching and go 2-7, right? Because you got 2 more wins than what your talent right?
1 in 8.
Yeah, exactly. And so for parents, I guess in the community, in the world we live in now, we want instant gratification. We never want it to be our fault. And so what we need to do with parents is help educate the purpose of high school sports, right? In our level, we're not allowed to go out and recruit our athletes. And does it happen? Probably. Who are the best recruiters? Students. Who are students what students are going to recruit? Students that are going to recruit are the ones that love their coaches, right? And so if you hire the right person to start, they're going to build a program over time. And the leadership needs to understand that and support them, because otherwise what you're doing to pacify loud voices is you're creating a worse situation for your students. So what the leadership, and I worked in buildings in Vancouver that were not powerhouses, the Hudson's Bays, the Fort Vancouvers. When we had good runs, we cherished those. But we also honored our students and our coaches who were doing it the right way and maybe going 10-10 or 5-15. Does that mean we're mediocre? No. We would have coaches that outcoach the teams of the coaches who just jumped to a program, ran it for 2 or 3 years. All of a sudden that program starts slipping, they're gone, they blame their kids, right? And so what can we do? We need to make sure people understand the value of education-based programming. It's different. And then we need to continue. Right now we're working with new administrators, new ADs. Every month we do something online with them, a training to support what our State Athletic Association does. And it's more around the philosophy of why we have these things. And it takes courage to be in a leadership position. You have to be able to stand in the fire. But if you're fortunate enough to find a coach that loves their kids, that understands their sport, and is willing to put in the time for pennies an hour, literally pennies an hour, and take all that guff, you better support him or her.
Let's drill into that, because as you know, I was a head football coach at Highline High School from 2008 to 2012, I believe it was. Spent 5 years down at Highline. And when people talk to me about coaching, Mick, I tell them I couldn't believe how big the job was.
Yeah.
Can we drill deep into some of the things? Because I thought it was only football coaches. It's not just football coaches, the volleyball coaches, the soccer coaches. It's strength and conditioning. It's weight room. It's fundraising. It's checking up to make sure the athletes are going to class, making sure that the athletes are eligible, following up on injuries, hiring a coaching staff. The job has gotten really big for high school coaches.
It's a significant job. And, at the high school level, we're never going to pay what it's worth.
I forgot that.
Yeah. I mean, we would periodically have our coaches track their hours, and I hated doing it because all of a sudden, right, they realize what they're doing. They do it out of love. Some people do it out of ego. They don't last very long, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. So the job is tremendous. The legal liabilities that they're put in. And, used to be when I started, if you were going to coach, you needed to teach. So you had this fundamental education coming through the system about what it meant to be a coach. Today, a majority of our coaches are non-educators, right? Not that that's bad. It involves the system having to support them more on what it's like. If you come out of the club system, you have very different responsibilities than you do in a school system. And so, a lot of coaches get in. The other piece is because of those demands, we're hiring a lot of coaches before, coaches who maybe wouldn't have even gotten the freshman job once upon a time, or you hadn't spent 10, 12, 15 years as an assistant before you got a shot at a head job. We're hiring them right out of college or right off the street, and they've coached a little bit of club, and we have to teach them how to be a head coach. And so that alone, when you have some unbelievably talented high school coaches in the state, now you got to put your team up against that team. So not only the X's and O's, but just how to prepare a team, how to work with young people. So coaching is an incredibly difficult job that is not compensated. And so when you have parents or community or administrators who are blaming you, no one wants to hear our talent pool is not equal to your talent pool. But the reality is we all have different. I could not sit in that seat and do this. I will tell you that right now. So
let me my good friend Jeb Binns, who worked with me down at Highline High School, and we would talk about it, the competitive nature of it, because if we just wanted to help kids, we could go work at a YMCA, and we talked about that, but there is a certain aspect of where it is competitive, and there's nothing like, for me, the rush of being out there on Friday nights and having worked all week to get your team prepared on 4 hours of sleep every night and study and film. How do we convey to the parents, how do we convey to the fans and the alumni who are looking at the results a couple of days later and maybe at the water cooler and Highline got beat 42-12 again? How do we convey to them that it's not pro sports, and how do we convey to them, and you touched on it earlier, the scoreboard? How do we change the scoreboard to make people feel comfortable and proud of the results that they're seeing, even though they might be on the other side of that scoreboard?
Well, we have to create a scoreboard that reflects the wins of the program. So go 1-8, but you have, what's your team's GPA? What kind of community service have they done? What are they doing with mentoring young people? How many 3 and outs did they have week 7 as opposed to week 1? So we can create that scoreboard. And in today's world with social media, let's inundate the world with social media of what our redefined scoreboard was. Now, do we want to win games? Heck yeah, we want to win games, right? It's about competition. There's nothing wrong with good, healthy competition, but the final score doesn't have to define who we are as a person, right? If you and I go out and play horseshoes and I lose, right? Tells me you're a better horseshoe player than I am, right? But it doesn't, but that's where it ends, right? How I handle losing is going to say more about me than how well I chuck them, right? I don't even know what the right term for horseshoes. Do people even play horseshoes anymore?
They do.
Okay.
Casey Losh and those Seattle Prep parents, we play some horseshoes. So don't get on me about that.
So I think we just need to define what that scoreboard is. And again, that's where, as our team at the WIAA gets our feet underneath us with now coming out of COVID, that these are places we definitely want to lean in. Where we talked about this week 1, we're a governance agency. We need to be a service agency. We have over 90 new athletic directors this year in just over 400 schools. So I'm going to repeat that. Over 90 new athletic directors. So when they're going into their school trying to support 50 coaches, right, and thousands of participants, they're not going to get to this. So we need to find a way with the Washington State Coach Association, with the Washington State Athletic Administrators Association, with WIAA. How do we define that and make it available to them, and then they run with it? So that's just, it's not something we've gotten to. We need to get to it, and we will get to it. I just can't promise you when.
This is Mick Hoffman. He is the executive director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I am Juan Cotto, Rainier Avenue Radio.world, man about town, and I am here today speaking with him as we do every Tuesday on WIAA Primetime, discussing the issues for athletes who participate in sports at the high school level throughout Washington State. If you like politics, and many of you know that I dabbled in politics a little bit, if you like politics, Rainier Avenue Radio is your home. Rainier Avenue Radio covers all the local races coming up here as we head into the election season in November. And if you read Tip O'Neill's book a couple of decades ago, All Politics is Local, you understand the importance of these local elections. Certainly, we have a couple of statewide elections that are important. We are electing a U.S. Senator this year, certainly. And we also have a number of congressional seats at the federal level. But there are many races, especially here in King County, the prosecutor's up, and there are a number of local races that are so important, and Rainier Avenue Radio will be having information on those radio stations. So please stay tuned so you can be an informed voter. And as we talked about during the Seattle Prep Garfield game and that game's on the Louvre field, please get out and vote and exercise your right to vote. Mick, when people ask me what is more painful than losing football games, I almost scoff. In my career, I lost a lot of games, and really felt like I was building my program. But I'll tell you, what was more painful was two of my assistants who worked with me, and they became head coaches, and them losing their positions. And I know that they were working so hard to build their programs. They had support from the parents, and a couple of new athletic directors came in, and the administration. And what makes it so disappointing from a person who saw that, and you feel like a parent at that time. I wanted to go talk to the principals, and I wanted to go and kick sand and create a dust up over it. What makes it so painful is that they were working so hard to pull those programs together, and they were making impact in kids' lives and in the program's lives and in the school. And due to circumstances, it's hard for me because I was there at the school that I was at for 5 years, and at least kids who were alumni got to come back a couple years later and still see the same head coach. Yeah. It seems that certain schools, the coaches change over and there's never any continuity. And once again, I know this happens at the school level, and this is also through the district level. But is there anything that the WIAA can do to make sure that, should there be some sort of standard, or should there be some sort of way that we can evaluate this on a more holistic level before they make the decision to let a coach go?
Yeah, just by the way we're structured in the state, coaches are personnel issues, right? And so the best we can do is influence through the Superintendent's Association. We work very closely. Then we have Superintendent's Advisory Group, same with school directors, and it's around messaging. I get a chance to get in front of them a few times a year. And actually, you triggered another idea for me. This is great, right? You asked me to come, and you're giving me all these ideas. But if schools are going to remove coaches because of wins and losses, then at the same time, the question would be, what are they doing to prepare their coaches, set their coaches up for success? So, for example, in Vancouver, when I was down there, we were losing coaches quite a bit, mostly because we were hiring them. We wouldn't have a deep applicant pool, not a lot of numbers. And we were hiring coaches, young coaches, who maybe weren't quite ready. And then they would get into the games, they'd be overwhelmed, they'd be overrun by parents, and they would leave on their own accord. We almost never had to non-renew a coach. The only time we would non-renew a coach is if, one, they were bad for kids, right? Meaning how they interacted with students. That's it. But number two is if they weren't following the rules, right? If they're cheating, if they were putting the school in a position where it was going to impact their potential opportunities down the road. So otherwise, it's the responsibility of the employer to prepare your employee for success. So we started a mentoring program, very comprehensive mentoring program for new coaches. And it was a great story. My first year, go up to Ellensburg, Central Washington for the 2A volleyball tournament. And I walked in, there's this young lady whose team she's coaching. She was now up in the Tacoma area coaching, and she had played with my daughter in high school. And we had hired her. She was the only one who applied for the job, the only one. And so we said, okay, let's get her with a mentor. We got her with a mentor, a lady who had actually coached her that had gotten out, and who worked in my office and helped me develop the program. And Susie comes back, she goes, she doesn't even know they got to do tryouts. Like, we're going to have to really wrap our arms around her. So she was so inexperienced because she had coached club at the middle level where you just got your team, right? Now she's the boss. So it goes back to our early part of our conversation. All the things coaches have to do. And on top of it, school districts were saying, because coaches would be accused of X, Y, and Z for cutting a student. So now they had to develop this whole criteria around cuts and all that. So it became very bureaucratic. I mean, with the right intent, but just heavier burden. So here's this young lady. She doesn't even know she has to do cuts. So she made it through the first year. We supported her. We supported her next year with a mentor. It worked well, her working with Susie. And I go up to Ellensburg, and she's got her team, a team that traditionally does not make the state tournament, in the state tournament. So here's a young person that just because she got a little extra attention, a little bit of love. 5 years earlier, we probably would have had to remove her the first year because she just was in over her head. It was we shouldn't, but we didn't have anybody else to hire. So do we not have a program for the girls? Within 5 years, she has grown so much as a coach because she put in the work, right? It was her. We did the framework. She did the work. that she's coaching up there. She was pregnant at the time and got married. That's why she left us, right? So here's another, now she's going to be a young mother. She's a new wife. And I asked her, you going to stay in this profession? And she said, absolutely. I love it. She loves it. In her first year, right, she was so overwhelmed. And so I think that's what the WI can do, is bring those types of programs as an opportunity throughout the state. And then schools have to implement it. Because again, it's their employer-employee relationship. We can just bring best practices, encourage it through the Coach Association to be our partner in that, have the Athletic Director Association do it. And like I said, we're very intentional with our athletic directors. We have to get to that coaches level, which is a very difficult contact. You're dealing with 50,000, number one. And number two is we don't get a lot of interface with them like we do with our athletic administrators. So it's a challenge, but it's a must if we're going to continue to help our schools offer quality programs.
Explain to everyone the clock hours that coaches need. And we'd go to clinics and we'd get the clock hours, and we would hold on to those, and we would send them all down to the state to make sure that the coaches were getting, I believe it was a minimum of 90 every 2 years for football and so forth. I think it's one of the things that people don't know, and I certainly didn't know it until I started coaching, how much training and the responsibility that coaches have to make sure that they are keeping up on the most recent practices regarding concussions and so forth. And tell us about that process, and tell us about how that continues to keep coaches not only informed, but hopefully better coaches.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the education business. We want lifelong learners, right? We can always get better. And so every 5 years, they're required to have X amount of hours, and we've designated 5 specific criteria that we mentioned earlier. In addition, depending on the sport you coach, you also have some. So, for example, stunting and cheer and dance. Pole vault coaches need certain one. Swim coaches need diving. Football coaches have one. And so it's time, right? And in addition, you have all your, none of it's X's and O's, again, right? Where most coaches coming into the profession are worried of, I was a basketball guy. I want to make sure I have a couple options if you half-court trap me, right? And so I need to learn that, and then I got to be able to teach it. That's not our focus. Our focus is around that social emotional, the safety, physical safety of our students. That's the first requirement, right? And then from there, we delve into X's and O's. And so, yeah, coaches are continually having to renew their coaches certification, no different than teachers.
This is Mick Hoffman. He is the Executive Director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I'm Juan Cotto of Rainier Avenue Radio.world, and you've probably seen me on a football game or two. And Friday night, Rainier Avenue Radio will be bringing high school football, which is one of my favorite programs that we do. First of all, at 5 o'clock, the Rainier Beach Vikings, Coach Corey Sampson, the University of Oregon recruit, Caleb. His name is skipping my brain. Sorry about that, Caleb. It'll come to me. Caleb, you know you're going to the University of Oregon. If you were a Husky, I'd remember you. But they are taking on the Roosevelt Rough Riders, 5 p.m. at the venerable old Memorial Stadium. Still a jewel in our community in the shadow of the Space Needle. And what a great place to watch high school football. If you are out in the community and looking for something for your family to do Friday night, it is a wonderful, safe, and clean environment. Go watch some high school sports. You'll be glad that you did. At 7:45, you get 2 games for the price of 1. And certainly if you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio, if you have it on in the background, that'd be a great thing to do. The Garfield Bulldogs and their centennial year, 100 years of this great high school in our community here in Seattle. They are taking on the Ballard Beavers. That's going to be 7:45 at Memorial Stadium. Garfield, the number 2 ranked team in the state. CJ Camayong, their quarterback, tremendous speed and quickness on the outside with their receivers, but a group of kids who play very, very well together and very worthy of their number 2 state ranking for the Bulldogs. Should be an exciting night of football down at Memorial Stadium. Please get a chance to go check it out a little bit. What can we do to prevent coach burnout?
Well, that's a good question. I think number one is give some space and grace. Support coaches by encouraging them and thanking them rather than just demanding. I think the other piece is with the expectations of all the out of season work is finding ways to, this is one spot, And I know as a coach and an AD, you're always concerned about how involved parents are, if they're there for the right reasons or personal reasons, but finding ways to provide those out of season opportunities for students that aren't just relying on the head coach. You had mentioned 7-on-7. When that amendment came up as a new sport in the state of Washington, some of the head coaches were concerned about, well, I'm gonna have to coach 2 seasons now. And it's really more perspective. This would be a great opportunity for a young assistant coach to be the head of a program, right? It's different. Flag is different than, or 7-on-7 is so much different than tackle with the responsibilities, equipment, everything else. But to get the opportunity to be in the boss, right? Because when you're ultimately responsible, it's a very different one. So I think, and then the other piece is what we expect them to do out of season. The reality is students who are motivated and want to play are going to play. Share some of the responsibilities in schools. Why should the football coach or the wrestling coach or the girls basketball coach always have to be the one to open the weight room 3, 4, 5 days a week? Like, let's share that as a staff. And so I think there's some of those things, but realistically, parents just need to understand they're incredibly lucky if they have a coach that loves what he or she is doing and loves their kids. And if you start from there, there's a lot of opportunity to move forward. So.
One last question. Why would you tell a young person to be a coach in today's environment?
Well, if you want to positively impact other people, for me in my career, there's never been a better way than coaching. There's still almost 40-year-olds in my life that call me coach. I mean, when they're calling you coach out of respect, that's like being called dad or mom. And when they're calling you up or they're messaging you and telling you about things in their lives, when you're invited to significant events in their life, that's a payback. That tells you you've made a difference. And I think everybody wants to make a difference in other people's lives. I don't care where they come from, what they've done. We all want to do that. And so as a coach, you get that opportunity. If you get win a championship or win a majority of games, that's a bonus. But if you want to positively impact young people and make a difference in this world, coaching is a great opportunity.
He's Mick Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association. I am Juan Cotto for Rainier Avenue Radio, and we will be back next week to have more stimulating conversation about high school athletics in the state of Washington. Mick, thank you so much for being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me.